Sarah Martinez walked into the busy coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. Her sleeve rolled up just enough to reveal the edge of a distinctive tattoo on her forearm. The morning rush was in full swing, and she needed her usual caffeine fix before heading to her job at the local veterinary clinic. As she stood in line, she noticed 3 young men in their early 20s sitting at a corner table. They were dressed casually in designer clothes, clearly college students from the nearby university. Their conversation was loud enough that other customers were starting to glance their way. "Look at that girl's tattoo," one of them said, pointing in Sarah's direction. "What do you think it means?" "Probably some trendy nonsense," his friend laughed. "These people just get random symbols tattooed on themselves without even knowing what they represent." "It's so fake," the third one joined in. "Yeah, my dad says people like that are just trying to look tough or interesting. They have no idea about real sacrifice or service." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She could feel other customers looking between her and the group, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. The barista at the counter seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but continued taking orders. The tattoo on Sarah's forearm was not random at all. It was a carefully designed memorial piece featuring a military insignia surrounded by dates and coordinates. But these strangers had no way of knowing its significance, and she wasn't about to explain herself to them. She pulled her sleeve down and focused on the menu board, trying to ignore the continued comments from the table. The line moved slowly, and she could still hear their voices discussing her appearance and making assumptions about her character. "Excuse me, miss," the barista said when it was finally her turn. "I'm sorry about that. Some people just don't have manners," Sarah managed a weak smile. "It's okay. Can I get a large coffee with extra cream, please?" As she waited for her order, she could feel the weight of stares from around the coffee shop. Some customers seemed supportive, while others appeared to be judging her themselves. The morning that had started peacefully was quickly becoming one she wanted to forget. The coffee shop door chimed as another customer entered, but Sarah was too focused on getting her drink and leaving to pay attention to who it might be. The newcomer was a tall man in his late 40s, wearing a simple navy baseball cap and casual civilian clothes. He moved with a quiet confidence that somehow commanded respect without drawing attention. His eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in the uncomfortable atmosphere and the source of the disturbance. He approached the counter and ordered a black coffee, his voice calm and measured. While waiting, he couldn't help but overhear the continued commentary from the college students. "I bet she doesn't even know what branch of service that symbol represents," one of them said, still focused on Sarah. "People wear military stuff like it's fashion now." "Totally disrespectful to real veterans," another added. "My grandfather fought in Vietnam and he hates seeing people fake military connections." The man in the baseball cap turned slightly, observing Sarah as she received her coffee. He noticed how she kept her head down, clearly hurt by the ongoing comments. Something about her posture and the way she carried herself struck him as familiar. Sarah moved toward the exit, but the comments followed her. "Hey, nice ink," one of the students called out mockingly. "Did you get that at the mall?" She paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around and confront them. Instead, she took a deep breath and pushed through the door. The man watched her go, then turned his attention fully to the 3 young men. Their laughter and conversation continued, completely unaware that their behavior had been witnessed by someone who might have a very different perspective on the situation. "Some people have no shame," one of them said, shaking his head, "wearing military symbols when they probably never served a day in their lives." The man collected his coffee and walked slowly toward their table. His movement was deliberate, not threatening, but there was something about his presence that caused the conversation to gradually die down. The students looked up at him as he approached, perhaps expecting him to agree with their assessment or share in their amusement. They had no idea that their morning was about to take a very different turn. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that immediately captured their attention. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the young lady who just left." The 3 students looked up with confident smirks, assuming this older man was about to validate their opinions. The first one, who had been the most vocal, leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, crazy, right?" he said. "These people just slap military tattoos on themselves like they're decorations. No respect for what they actually mean." His friend nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly what we were saying. She probably bought that design off the internet without knowing anything about real military service. The man stood quietly for a moment, his expression unreadable. Other customers in the coffee shop had begun to notice the interaction, sensing that something significant was happening. "Tell me," the man said calmly. "What do you know about military service?" The question caught them slightly off guard, but they quickly recovered their confidence. "Well, like I said, my grandfather was in Vietnam," the first student replied, "and my dad works for a defense contractor. We know about real sacrifice and service." "Right," added another. "Not like these posers who wear the symbols without earning them." The man nodded slowly, as if considering their words carefully. "I see. And you were able to identify the specific tattoo she was wearing? You recognize the insignia?" The students exchanged glances, suddenly less certain. They hadn't actually gotten a clear look at the details of Sarah's tattoo. "It was obviously military," one of them said defensively. "Some kind of unit patch or whatever." "Actually," the man replied, his voice still calm but with a new edge, "it was a Navy SEAL trident. Specifically, a memorial tattoo that included dates and coordinates that I happened to recognize." The confidence began to drain from their faces as the implications of his words started to sink in. "How would you know that?" the first student asked, his voice no longer quite as steady. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached up and slowly removed his baseball cap, revealing short gray hair and scars that spoke of a life of service and sacrifice. Around the coffee shop, other customers had stopped their conversations. The atmosphere had shifted completely from the casual morning buzz to something much more serious and profound. With his cap removed, the man's bearing became unmistakably military. His posture, the way he held his head, and the quiet authority in his presence left no doubt about his background. The three students were beginning to realize they had made a serious mistake. "The young lady you were mocking," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent coffee shop, "is Sarah Martinez. Her brother was Petty Officer First Class Miguel Martinez, a Navy SEAL who gave his life in Afghanistan 3 years ago." The color drained from the students' faces. Other customers in the shop had stopped pretending not to listen, and several were pulling out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. "The tattoo you found so amusing," the man continued, "contains the coordinates of the location where Miguel died protecting his teammates. It includes the date of his death and the insignia of SEAL Team 5, the unit he served with distinction." One of the students tried to speak, but no words came out. The reality of their behavior was hitting them like a physical blow. "Miguel Martinez was awarded the Bronze Star with Valor posthumously," the man went on. "He saved the lives of 4 other SEALs before succumbing to his wounds. Sarah gets that tattoo touched up every year on the anniversary of his death." The silence in the coffee shop was complete now. Even the espresso machine seemed to have stopped hissing in the background. "I know this," the man said, his voice becoming even more serious, "because I was Miguel's commanding officer. I was there when he died. I was the one who had to call Sarah and tell her that her little brother wasn't coming home." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The 3 students looked as if they wanted to disappear into the floor. "Commander James Walsh, U.S. Navy SEALs, retired," he said, introducing himself properly for the first time. Without another word, Commander Walsh came to attention and rendered a slow, perfect military salute. It wasn't directed at the students or anyone else in the coffee shop. It was for Miguel Martinez, for Sarah's pain, and for the memory of a fallen hero whose sacrifice had been mocked by people who had never risked anything for their country. The salute seemed to last forever, though it was probably only 30 seconds. In that time, the entire coffee shop was transformed. Several veterans among the customers recognized what was happening and quietly stood up. An elderly man near the window, who had been reading a newspaper, slowly rose to his feet and placed his hand over his heart. Commander Walsh held his salute with the precision and dignity that only comes from years of military service. His eyes were focused somewhere beyond the walls of the coffee shop, perhaps seeing the face of a young SEAL who had died too soon, or maybe thinking of Sarah's tears when he had delivered the worst news a family could receive. When he finally lowered his hand, the silence continued for several more moments. The 3 students sat frozen, their earlier arrogance completely gone. They looked like children who had just realized the magnitude of their mistake. "I'm sorry," one of them finally whispered. his voice barely audible. Commander Walsh turned his attention back to them, his expression serious but not angry. "You're not the ones who need an apology," he said quietly. "Sarah Martinez deserves your apology. More than that, she deserves your respect." He picked up his coffee, which had been cooling on a nearby table. Miguel Martinez was 24 years old when he died. Same age as you, probably. He had a whole life ahead of him. Plans to go to college when his service was complete. Dreams of starting a family. The students exchanged looks, each of them thinking about their own plans and dreams, probably for the first time realizing how precious and fragile those dreams could be. Instead, he chose to serve his country, Walsh continued. He chose to put his life on the line for people he would never meet, including people who might one day mock his memory in a coffee shop. An older woman at a corner table wiped tears from her eyes. A younger customer, probably around the same age as the students, was staring at them with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Commander Walsh placed his cap back on his head, the simple action somehow marking the end of a ceremony that had transformed everyone present. "Think about that the next time you see someone wearing military insignia," he said. "Think about Miguel Martinez and ask yourself what you've done to earn the freedom to sit in this coffee shop and make jokes about other people's pain." Commander Walsh turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Sarah works at the animal clinic on Maple Street," he said without looking back. "If you want to make this right, that's where you'll find her." After he left, the coffee shop remained unusually quiet. The normal morning chatter didn't resume. Instead, customers spoke in hushed tones, many of them looking at the three students with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disgust. The first student, whose name was Kyle, stared at the table. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee cup. "We really messed up," he said to his friends. Brad, the second student, nodded slowly. "I feel sick. Did you see the way he looked at us? Like we were the worst kind of people." The third student, Marcus, hadn't said anything since Commander Walsh had started speaking. He was thinking about his own younger sister, trying to imagine how he would feel if someone mocked a memorial tattoo she got for him. "We have to go apologize," Kyle said finally. "We have to find her and tell her we're sorry." "What if she doesn't want to hear it?" Brad asked. "What if she's too angry to listen?" Marcus finally spoke up. "Then we deserve that. We deserve whatever she says to us." Other customers were still watching them, some with curiosity, others with judgment. The barista who had served Sarah earlier approached their table. "I knew there was something special about that tattoo," she said quietly. "Sarah comes in here every Tuesday morning. She's always polite, always tips well, and she's never bothered anyone. You guys really hurt her." The weight of their actions was becoming more real with each passing minute. These weren't just words thrown around carelessly anymore. They had hurt a real person who was carrying real pain. "The animal clinic on Maple Street?" Kyle asked the barista. She nodded. "About 6 blocks from here. But maybe you should think about what you're going to say before you show up there." She's been through enough without having to deal with more thoughtless comments. The three friends looked at each other, each of them knowing that their morning of casual cruelty had changed something fundamental about how they saw themselves and the world around them. 2 hours later, the three students stood outside the Maple Street Animal Clinic, having spent the time researching Miguel Martinez online and learning about his service record. They had read about his commendations, seen photos of him with his unit, and found news articles about his death that painted a picture of a genuine American hero. Kyle pushed open the clinic door, his heart pounding. The smell of antiseptic and the sound of barking dogs greeted them. Behind the reception desk sat Sarah, now wearing scrubs, her tattoo clearly visible as she worked on paperwork. She looked up when they entered, and her expression immediately changed when she recognized them. Her face showed a mixture of surprise, wariness, and hurt. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice professional but cold. Kyle stepped forward, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Ms. Martinez, we came to apologize. We were the ones in the coffee shop this morning, and we said terrible things about your tattoo." Sarah set down her pen and studied their faces. "I remember," she said simply. "We didn't know," Brad said quickly. "We didn't know about your brother or what the tattoo meant." "That's not an excuse," Marcus interrupted, looking directly at Sarah. "We had no right to make fun of you, even if we thought it was just a random tattoo. What we did was cruel and wrong." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching their faces. She could see that they were genuinely remorseful, but she had heard apologies before from people who were sorry they got caught, not sorry for their actions. "Tell me about my brother," she said finally. The request caught them off guard, but Kyle began recounting what they had learned. Petty Officer First Class Miguel Martinez. He served with SEAL Team 5 in Afghanistan. He saved 4 of his teammates when their position was overrun, and he died protecting them. He got the Bronze Star with valor, Brad added quietly. He was 24, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. He was my little brother, even though he was bigger and stronger than me. He used to call me every Sunday when he was deployed just to hear my voice and make sure I was okay. The 3 young men stood silently, finally understanding the magnitude of the loss they had mocked. "Commander Walsh told us where to find you," Kyle said. He said Miguel was his responsibility and that he was there when Miguel died, Sarah finished. "Commander Walsh has called me every year on the anniversary. He sends flowers to my parents. He never lets us forget that Miguel's sacrifice mattered." She stood up and walked around the desk, stopping in front of them. For a moment they thought she might ask them to leave. Instead, she rolled up her sleeve completely, showing them the full tattoo. It was beautiful and intricate, with Miguel's name, his dates of service, the SEAL Trident, and coordinates that marked the place where he had given everything for his country. "This tattoo cost me $800 and took 6 hours to complete," she said. "But Miguel's life was worth everything to me. When people like you make jokes about it, you're making jokes about the worst day of my life." The 3 students were crying now, the full weight of their cruelty finally hitting them. "We're sorry," Kyle said, his voice breaking. "We're so sorry." Sarah looked at each of them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you are. Miguel always said that good people can make bad choices, and that real character comes from what you do after you realize you've made a mistake." She extended her hand to Kyle, then to each of the others. "Thank you for coming here. Thank you for learning about Miguel, and thank you for understanding why this matters." As they left the clinic, the 3 friends knew they would never again make assumptions about strangers or mock what they didn't understand. They had learned that behind every person is a story, and some of those stories involve sacrifice and loss that deserves nothing but respect. Commander Walsh's salute had honored more than just Miguel Martinez that morning. It had honored all, the fallen heroes whose memories are carried by the people who loved them, and it had taught 3 young men that freedom comes with the responsibility to treat that gift with dignity and respect.